Welcome, very special guest, Gear. How you doing?
I am fantastic. How are you?
Good.
God, DJ GearBolt.
Oh my god. Cool.
Hi.
So I
So
think
I've I've
go
I've
ahead.
sucked you into this because we want to know. We want to know. You got stuff going on. You've got stuff coming up. So,
Sure.
but we want to know what got you started.
So
What brought
what started, I guess, like my music journey started years ago. It's probably maybe 8. Like I've loved music since I was little. My grandma played piano. And then I wanted to play piano. I got lessons and whatnot. My DJ journey started in 2019, kind of. I've been playing VR chat since October 17th of no, October 12th of 2017 is when I first started playing VR chat. At the time, I was playing Desky. I didn't even have VR. And like DJing in VR wasn't really a thing yet. It was like people would play music through their mics. And then about 2018 into 2019 was where the DJing scene started to grow a lot. 2019, I went to, it was a 4th of July event in VR, and I seen a DJ live streaming in a world. And I was like, I want to do that. It just clicked. I was like, I want to do that. Why can't I do? I want to do that. So I got hooked immediately. Bought a little mixer. I bought the DDJ SB3. It was a little 4-channel mixer, but it was just tiny little thing. It was awesome. And I started DJing with my music background at that point, because I'd been in music for a long time. I'd already had my own band at that point. I'd already just done a lot musically at that point. So picking up the DJing side of things was super comfortable for me. And it was quite the experience to go from, playing guitar and doing shows that way to the virtual scene and playing for virtual clubs. And I started playing for a group. I'm trying to remember the name. Lab the Third was the world creator, and he had his own little club. And I ended up playing for them for a few weeks, and really kind of got the feel of the VR chat club scene, because it was starting to grow really fast. And then I started DJing for AU, Alcoholics Unanimous, was like the first club that I sat down and decided this is what I want to do for VR, was play and DJ. And it was quite the experience. And yeah, it's been quite the journey. But it started I started, to answer your question shortly, I started in 2019 kind of picking all this up. So
for DJing, but you said you have a base in music, so like you have piano. I heard something about a banjo.
I want a banjo. I still haven't have
You
not
still haven't bought the banjo.
I haven't
Okay.
bought the banjo yet. I'm
Okay, so I
planning
know what
on
to
it, but
test you on. What about this
no.
band you were in? What was that all about?
So when I was in middle school, it was when I started learning guitar. 7th grade, started picking up guitar. I loved guitar, and I decided I wanted to create my own band. And so I talked to, once I became well, it really started in middle school. Me and my buddy Nathan were kind of a duet, and we played together. We did, like, they would have the talent show in middle school, and we'd go on stage and play like some AC/DC, classic rock and stuff. So, but it was just a duet at that point. Um, when I was a freshman in high school, that's when I brought in a couple other members, and I met my drummer, and he loved AC/DC as much as I did, and so we clicked immediately. So we had my drummer, my rhythm guitarist, and then we needed a bassist. And so my sophomore year, a freshman came in that happened to fit the mold. So we were starting to put pieces of this band together, and this band, we ended up naming it OCD, Our Crazy Dream, and it did really well through high school. It was a lot of fun. We ended up playing shows locally, and then because of our band teacher, we ended up playing the state fair, the county fair, and then we did my favorite show that we did as a group. We played for the governor of the state of Utah at a garden party. with a whole bunch of other bands. I think there were 28 other groups playing, and it was super cool. That was really a learning experience to my introductory path to music, and you know, it was great.
And also kind of being exposed to public, right?
Yes, 100%, 100%.
How did it
That's
feel
awesome.
transferring from kind of like an analog world into this whole like virtual digital landscape for music?
So it's so different, but it's also the same because there's so many similarities between the virtual scene and the IRL scene. Um, Similarities like the way the club is kind of structured, and I found that really interesting. But I didn't really experience the similarities till years later, after I kind of not so much left VR chat, because I still haven't left VR chat, but because I've done IRL stuff, a lot of IRL stuff. So, but you know, there's a lot of similarities between the IRL and VR, and it's cool to see that the growth of it, because I was there at the start when we didn't have the, you know, the actual established groups. We didn't really have. I was at the era where everyone sat in front of a mirror and one person played their music through their mic, and it was very scuffed, but you know, we made it work.
So from Prophet's era, you're both VRC granddaddies at this point. I
Yeah.
came in a little after, so just like at that cusp where things were starting to tilt into a full scene being born. Um, so you said you started out with this wee baby mixer, and it just
Yep.
went from there. I know that you mentioned that you were kind of going like taking a bit of a leave from VR, not totally out, not totally in. What were you up to then?
So let me see. It got to a point where I was just kind of wore out. I was DJing maybe 3 times a night, 4 days a week, and because I had my regular club, I would play for AU. I would play for Castle. Castle had her whole thing there, and I play for Wobble Wednesdays. And it got to a point I was playing so much. It was like people would tell me, "Oh, why aren't you changing up your music? You haven't really." And it's like, "Oh, well, because you have heard me on this night, you came to this night and this night. So you've heard like everything I have in my library." And it got to a point where it's like, I can't continuously keep doing this and keep it fresh. So that's a major reason why I took a break, was just to kind of reset and step away from the VR scene, because it was getting there was so much drama. There was so much drama, and you'll find that still in VR, there's sometimes it can be a lot of drama. So I was like, I
What?
need a break. I need to
No.
step away and just breathe for a minute and focus on me. And in that time period, I worked on my first publicly released album, Sounds of Magic. So that's what I was doing in the off time, was working on my folk rock album, Sounds of Magic.
So you utilized that time to
Yeah.
build within your
Mhm.
music career.
Yep.
Now, we had talked earlier when I was like finagling you in here,
Yeah.
which is so difficult, sarcasm completely. But um we were talking about how like, the importance if you want to become an RL DJ, like you have an agent
Yep.
or manager slash
Yep.
manager. Any advice for people who are wanting to start doing RL shows and residencies? Because you
Um,
have plenty of experience in this.
yeah. So I started DJing, I think it was 2020. This was right, well, no, it would have been 21. I started DJing for my first club in 21, and I DJ'd for 3 different clubs, and they different nights, different weeks. But I think the biggest piece of advice I can give for somebody that really wants to start getting into the IRL scene is just go to the clubs and hang out. And if you're a regular, you're gonna start to notice who's there regularly as well. You're going to start to get to know the staff and the actual people that make everything happen. Once you start becoming a regular, you'll start to kind of work your way into it. But I think the first thing that I had to do was show up to the club and hang out regularly. And that took a lot of my time, which is another reason why I wasn't able to get to the VR stuff. But it really helped boost my IRL career, was because I was focused on that. I wasn't so much
Yeah.
focused on the VR side of things. I was focused on IRL and IRL only. If you really want to get into that scene, you've got to be in that scene. So that's
It's the same as it is in VR, right?
yes.
Like,
Yep. And that kind of ties back into what I was saying about a lot of the similarities with the IRL scene and the VR scene is if you want to play for a club in VR chat, you have to show up to that club regularly, hang out, get to know everybody. And the same goes for IRL. So it was kind of cool to see that kind of distinction, because I had already played in VR for a few years at that point, and going to the IRL circuit, it was like, oh, there's so much similar. Like, there's the bouncers, here's the club coordinator in the back, and you get to chat with the people and the DJs after they're done with their sets, and it was there were so many similarities. It was really cool to see that.
how important was it for you to acquire an agent or a manager to where you are now? Like, did the growth accelerate a lot for you?
Honestly, a lot of the work was already done by me. I think I took a lot on my mantle before I even had the manager side of things. But the manager really helps with coordinating. Because here's the thing: once you have a manager, and you can find managers, a lot of times a manager is going to come to you. You can seek out a manager, which there's a few different ways to do that. You can go online and research and find your own manager that way. But a lot of times a manager is going to come to you once you start becoming kind of noticed, or you build some notoriety in your local scene. And you'll and this could be through a few different things, from interactions with the DJs you're currently playing with. You could get a manager that is already managing another DJ. That's happened. Or you can through the manager of another DJ get connected with the agency that they work through. So it's a couple different ways.
Okay. I want to open up to basic. I know
Yeah.
you have some.
Yes,
Mhm.
I do. I'm organizing my thoughts. Lots of different questions. I got started.
Anybody else?
Okay, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I'll
You
leave the floor.
ready?
Sure,
Or
why
are
not?
you organizing?
Sure, why not?
All right.
No, I got started in VR relatively recently, and it's been interesting to see. I guess I wanted to at some point transition over to asking about GearFest. I was curious about that, and I think that ties in well to DJs in this scene. I have other questions about IRL stuff, but I'm still organizing those, so I'll get back to them. So, what is this
Yeah.
GearFest thing?
All right. Glad you brought that up. GearFest 2025. GearFest was a little project I did a few years ago. It's 3 years ago now. Goodness. It started in 2022. I decided I wanted to host a birthday party, and I wanted to have 3 nights of DJing and fun with the community. But I also wanted to do some good for the community, and we attached a charity with the event. We ended up raising money for a charity called Fight for the Forgotten. We raised money to help build infrastructure and wells for the Pygmy people in New Guinea, and we raised I think $1,500 on the first event, and it was super fun. It was scuffed. It was scuffed because it was the first year we'd ever done anything like that, and it was really cool to see like the growth of it. But it wasn't as structured as I would have liked it to be. So we did it again in 2023, and we had Ministry Promotions help with that, and Ministry and Scoot got everything kind of structured for the next year, and it went really, really well. We had Focus Entertainment host the World, and we had again the same charity, Fight for the Forgotten, raised even more money than the year previous, and it was really successful. We had dancers, we had DJs, we had the whole works, and it was just an overall well done, put together event. We still had a couple of things to work out, because this was our second year trying to plan something like this, and So now we come to where we are today in the start of 2025, GearFest 2025, where it's the third year we have done this. We've had a lot of experience from the other years and coordinating with a ton of different clubs. Scoot is and Ministry Promotions. They have done such a fantastic job at structuring everything. We've kind of coordinated with different groups. It's gotten to the point now where VR Chat themselves, they are involved this year. They are helping sponsor this. They are fully involved in this. They've been in on meetings. And a lot of this was we start planning this in like September of last year. We start the planning process, and it starts from month to month. We'll sit down and kind of look at where we're at, schedule everything, kind of coordinate with all the clubs that we have. And we currently, as of today, because we had to count, Foxy and I,
36, 36.
36
Jeez.
clubs.
Communities.
And yeah,
Everyone from the big boys of VR chat all the way down to even brand new communities.
Cool.
It's really
and every, the main focus, and I talked about it at the very beginning event, the very first meeting, was we wanted to involve as many new DJs, as many new clubs, and just as many fresh blood as we could get, as much fresh blood as we could get into this event. Because while we could go back to using some of the same DJs and the same clubs as last year, because it's an easy fallback, I wanted some freshness to the event. And so we've added a ton of new faces. It's been really, really cool. This year is a little different. We are partnering with the American Red Cross. As you guys know, there's been a lot of crazy things that have happened, not only from the last year with the hurricanes that hit Florida and that whole coastline. I had family affected by that, so that's kind of why we decided to go with the American Red Cross. But currently, we've got the California wildfires, and that's a massive issue, and we decided like months ago we would partner with the Red Cross, and it's also now it's even more prominent because of the California wildfires. So it's been a really cool choice to have that, not that like capitalizing on it or anything. It's just kind of crazy that it worked out that way, that we're as a community focusing on giving back to the community that has given us so much. So it's kind of been our main focus for this whole mission, I suppose. And I mean, that's pretty much GearFest in a nutshell.
That's awesome. I love the altruistic nature and bringing in fresh blood into the scene. That's really cool. Seeing encouragement to people with their new skills. I think that's one of the bigger things I love seeing from this community, right? With people taking classes and trying to grow their skills from an absolute beginner into something that's means something to them. I know we were just talking right before this Q&A started about finding your passions in life, and how seeing that passion ignited in somebody new can just be such a special moment.
100%. And I think a big reason, like, I enjoyed, because I did a few festivals in VR. I did Mend Your Mind, which was a pretty big one, and then I did Slyfest, and seeing festivals like those and working on festivals like those really helps the coordination between many different clubs. I don't think I would have met all the DJs that I know currently if it wasn't for events like Mend Your Mind and Slyfest. So being able to give that opportunity to other clubs and other DJs and communities is so cool. And it's really cool for me to be able to give that to other people. So another reason why I do it.
Awesome. It's exciting.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Hit me with the hard-hitting questions. What you got? What you got, folks?
Sure, I'll keep going. At least a little bit of a space. I was leaving a space for other people to chime in if they want to.
Don't be shy.
Oh, I'm not shy.
Do not be shy.
Oh, other people.
No, not you. Everyone else who didn't.
Everyone else. Yeah, feel free to ask whatever you would like. Whether it's about DJing, music production, VR scenes, IRL scenes, you name it.
Yeah. All right. I admittedly haven't heard you DJ yet, which I feel like is a crime. What are your favorite genres? Do you have a sticking genre? Do you multi-genre? What's your go-to?
I'm a house head. I love house, bass house, tech house, just regular house. I love house, but when I first started in VR, I was playing a lot of rhythm because I love just the headbanging nature of rhythm.
Sure.
And I kind of leaned away from that because the IRL scene wasn't as fond of it. Now, that's, the clubs I was playing for. The clubs I was playing for were more dance clubs, dance oriented clubs. So I really found a love for house and bass house and tech house even. So those are my preferred genres, but I can play pretty much anything. Just recently got into techno. My buddy Ropai,
Cool.
he's great. He's like, he told me, "Oh, you got to try techno. I would love to hear a DJ GearBolt techno set." So, kind of been getting into techno recently.
Awesome.
I like techno because it's very similar to house. It's a little more upbeat than house, but it's cool. Very cool.
Awesome. On that note, with IRL DJ stuff, I imagine this is often the case where I admittedly don't have a whole lot of IRL experience when with going to clubs other than like college days, but those don't really count. Um, so if you're finding clubs, are clubs typically sticking to a single genre, or are they mixing around, or is it typically like more of a? You mentioned that the club you went to wasn't really a fan of rhythm stuff. Would you like find a different club if you really wanted to DJ rhythm, or like what does that look like?
100%. Each club's kind of got its own little scene, its own little following, if you will. Because some clubs that I played for, there was a club called Circle in downtown Salt Lake that they played heavy. They would just play heavy. That's all they played. Tear out rhythm, hardcore. That was all they played was that scene. Now, if you wanted that scene, you had to go to that club because it was the only club that played that type of music. Everything else would maybe like, so there was a club, Sky Salt Lake City, that had they would have weeknights. Like Thursday night was Therapy Thursday. You would have DJs like trying to think, Armin van Buren would come, for Therapy Thursday and play all his stuff. Or each with that club specifically, they would have each night of the week be a different kind of genre. So there were clubs that would do that too. So, but a lot of times you just go to the club and kind of get a good vibe, a good overall feel of what they enjoyed, and that's kind of how you gauge that. The way I've found is you just show up to the club and figure out their kind of schedule, because a lot of clubs will have a schedule and have it laid out, just like VR chats clubs will do. They'll have a schedule and have it laid out and planned, so you can kind of prepare for if you wanted. Say you get actually a gig, you're probably going to the promoter or whoever's creating the lineup's going to put you where they think you'll fit. So, good question, by the way.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. That's really interesting. You
Amir
mentioned.
has a
Oh yeah, I was going to say.
question. Any advice for starting a music library for an inspiring DJ? Can I get that out right? Getting started with Beatport.
Beatport's great. I 100% recommend like actually using because when I started out, I would YouTube to MP3, SoundCloud to MP3. While that's a great tool, we don't recommend it. Most professional DJs are going to use collected sources like Beatport, where you have a good library of music that's already registered, and it's actually formatted properly, so that when you plug it into proper equipment like these CDJs, it's going to play properly. And you'll notice the difference of quality when you plug that poor MP3 download into an actual club system. The club system's not going to like it at all. So I definitely recommend using Beatport as an option, or even Recordbox has their own pools of stuff. They just using DJ pools as your source for music is probably my recommendation, and many other DJs' recommendations for building your library. That's where you should start. SoundCloud, you got to be careful with the downloads from SoundCloud, because a lot of them are bootlegs and they'll be very crusty. So again, you want to, if you're going to get it, if you're aspiring and you really want to start building your library, I recommend like a music source like Beatport for sure.
Sweet.
They are responding.
I should pull up the chat here so I can follow along. Let's see, so much stuff.
It's in the voice chat, text chat too. You can pull it up.
Yeah.
It's in the voice chat, text chat, voice channel.
Here we go. I got you. Cool. Get you pulled up.
And what's your, I guess, following on a music choice, what's your process for scouting out new stuff, building up crates?
Oh, great question. So I just, as I mentioned, I was just starting a techno crate. I'll go through preset playlists that people have already made of a specific genre, say like techno, and I'll listen to every single song in that playlist from top to bottom. Whatever It's kind of my personal like feel. If I really enjoy the sound and feel of the song, the way if I enjoy it and it makes me giddy, and tickles my toes or whatever, um, that's kind of how I select the song. Is if I like it, I'm going to save that to my library. That's really just the only way I select my music is if I like it, I'm adding it to my library.
So you don't the skip through. You do a full listen, and
I'll
if
do a
you
full
agree,
listen.
then you add.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times I will kind of skim through. I'll listen to the intro. I'll jump to the chorus and hear the whole like build up and drop. Kind of the build up and drop is how I determine whether or not I'm going to like the song. That's how I determine if I'm going to like it or not. But, so I will skim through occasionally.
Yeah, makes sense. Curbing off of existing playlists is a good idea. Do you use SoundCloud for that, or what sources do you use to find those
SoundCloud's a
playlists?
great tool for finding like bootlegs, like I was mentioning before, or just unique stuff. Because sure, you could go on YouTube and download James Hype's newest track, but it's probably going to get you copyright stricken if you try and post that set to YouTube. And so a lot of like local DJs that I've worked with will use things like SoundCloud or Beatport to find those kind of niche songs so that they're kind of underground. They don't get copyright striked. If you're recording a set, you're doing a show live and you record it all and it's great. Then you post it and 13 of the songs that were in your set get copyrighted.
Mhm.
You'll get muted. Those will get muted on YouTube, and then it kind of ruins the feel and the vibe of the whole show. So
That's something to ask you about. Like, you do live sets on
mm.
YouTube. You also post up sets. Like, how do you get around just being smacked every time you try to do something?
A lot of
And
times,
you
so it really depends. Sometimes I just don't care. Like if I say I'm doing a show just for on a whim, I really don't care. I'll live stream it and I'll have the VOD there saved and it gets muted and whatever. That sometimes I don't care. But if I'm setting down, like if you look at my YouTube channel, I have a playlist of just my live shows that I've sat down and edited and whatnot. And when I'm putting one of those together, I always make sure not always, but majority of the time I'll sit down and make sure that the music selection will not get me copyright strike so everyone can enjoy the whole show. Does that make sense?
yeah,
That makes
makes total
sense.
sense.
That adds that like an additional restriction on top of your song selection. So that's
Yeah, yeah.
almost annoying, right?
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
want to be able to
yeah.
play
It could be
whatever you're feeling.
a little annoying.
Interesting.
So we have in chat, do you have a method for putting a set together? This has been a huge weight on the music I choose to buy.
Method for putting it together. So kind of. So I use Recordbox has a really, really cool feature at the very bottom that gives you suggested songs. A lot of DJ softwares will have that built in. Once you get your library built, you can go to they'll have an option for it somewhere. They should. If they don't, then you'll just have to build it yourself. But the way I've done it recently is I use Recordbox, and Recordbox is kind of, you will find Recordbox is the industry standard. When you show up to a festival and you're getting ready to play for 5,000 people, you're going to show up with these CDJs and record boxes built in. I recommend to anybody watching this or listening to learn Recordbox. Recordbox is the industry standard right now. Now, Denon is another one. Denon DJ, they have their own equipment. I'm not a big fan of Denon DJ. That's personal bias just because of the years of learning IRL and working on Pioneer equipment. Pioneer's equipment is kind of, again, the club standard, the industry standard. So when you show up to a club or a venue, you're going to have the Pioneer equipment majority of the time. Not always the case, but in Recordbox software, they have an option at the bottom that will give you suggested songs. So I'll start with the opening track, and then off of that, you can go down into it'll match key and BPM, your beats per minute. It'll help you actually select, it'll give you a bunch of songs out of your library that would fit to transition into the next track. And then from that, you just keep adding to the crate, and you create a set list. I create a set list that way. I'll start with the opener. I'll drag a song in at a time. The way I'll listen to the tail end of the first song, and then the very beginning of whatever track I'm going to be bringing in. And kind of off of that, I'll just drag in. And I like playing in order. Some people just play by key and random. I recommend this to anybody: is structure your set from start to finish, and because it's a show, you should look at it as if it's a production and a show that you are presenting to the audience. And that's not always the case. A lot of that is dependent on the venue and what the event is. So, good question. Very good question.
You adding on to that one, do you do the whole like bring them in, bring them up, and ride those waves throughout your show where you're bringing things up and down as far as intensity goes, right? Or do you like to just do a straight let's ride?
100%. You want to, and the way I've done it, the way I learned was there's kind of a ebb and flow to it. You can really ramp it up and bring it to just like everybody's jumping, but you'll find the crowd gets very exhausted. When you're bringing the tempo really high and everybody's vibing, and then the best thing to do is kind of ease it back down, like you were saying, Foxy. Ease it back down, kind of let everyone catch their breath, and then bring it back up. It's a bit of a wave, but if you do it efficiently and effectively, it makes for a really fun and really really cool show. But definitely, you want to mix in some of the slower down tempo so that people can relax and catch their breath, and then bring it back up. So, 100%.
Get that drink at the bar.
Yep, yep. Give them a second. Give them a second. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget what I think it might have been last week. We were watching an interview or something along those lines, and somebody had mentioned that that bar owners, that club the club folks would get upset if you went hard for the whole hour because people wouldn't like go to the bar and get drinks.
Yep. It's
Yeah,
really
that's
a
also something
factor.
Richie Rich brought up in one of the Q&A sessions. We had him
Oh
in
yeah, yeah,
here, and
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
asked about the DJ thing, and it was like, that you gotta give that time, because if they're not buying drinks, you ain't playing that club again.
Yep. That's a really big factor in it too. Is how when I started DJing like for the club, and I got my manager, one of the first questions he asked me was, realistically, how many tickets can you sell? Because the club is going to ask you that question when you start DJing for them regularly. How many tickets can you sell? Because it's not so much about the music or the DJ. It's the club's trying to make money, and at the end of the day, that's all they're trying to do. And if you're not making them money, you're gone. It's kind of a harsh world, but that's the hard truth of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, makes sense. What other considerations for IRL DJing did you have to make, if any other come to mind, that are different than VR, or just things that you wouldn't have expected when you first got into it?
okay, so there's a few courtesy things when you're there. They have back-to-back nights, and I can get into that in a minute. But we'll start with like when you show up to the club, and like VR, you have a lineup. And where you're at in the lineup, one thing that you want to be courteous about is knowing who's before you and who is after you. That's a big part in playing an actual club, is because if you show up and you're playing Tiesto, but Tiesto just came before you, and you're going to play a bunch of his songs, like it kind of clashes. So
Yeah.
knowing who's before you and after you is really important. Say you're playing, and James Hype is after you, and you're playing a bunch of James Hype songs right as your set's finishing. That's not very courteous to James Hype, because he's now like, what? Well, I can't play this song because you've already used it. And a lot of times when I show up, I'll listen or even talk to the DJ before me, and figure out, because you don't really have to worry as much about the person after you. It's the person before you. Kind of, if you can, if you get the opportunity, talk to the person before you, and like, what are you playing? What genre? So I know, and what are you going to end on? What's your final track? So I can, ease into it. That really helps your transitions. That helps you kind of work into the flow of things. And when you show up, you can ease into it. There's a bit of a courtesy thing. You'll have decks. There's 4 decks in front of you, just like there is here. You'll plug into the mixer. There's usually 4 different ports on the CDJs in front of you, and say you're plugging into deck 3, and this DJ's on deck 1 currently playing. He'll finish deck 1 and 2, and then you're going to start on 3, but you've got to wait for his signal. So you plug in, you get your track ready, and then once he's done transitioning, a lot of times, and this is a piece of advice: set a loop, and they usually the person before you will set a loop, and then you can work from that loop into your current track as you begin your set. So it's kind of a smooth transition into the next DJ. But a lot of it is
Oh,
like
that's cool.
paying attention to what the song selection is, where you're at on the deck, and then waiting for the DJ to give you the go ahead, and then you start mixing in. So
This
yeah.
is something in VR that you can't obviously physically,
Yeah.
do, but personally, I think it's kind of doable in the same fashion in VR, and I really respect people who do that, which is okay. What are you playing? How are what's your vibe going to be? So that when I go live, we're going to switch right over, and it's not going to be like getting a cold, bucket of water dropped all over your
Right,
crowd,
right.
because that can really
Yeah.
shock people.
That's a great point, Foxy. You'll find like and I when I made the lineup for GearFest, I didn't really I let the DJ pick which slot they wanted, and I didn't think about genre because there's no specific genre for the festival. It's DJ's choice. So it's gonna be very interesting to see like kind of how
Who's
it
talking
plays
to
out.
who and
Yeah.
how everybody flows. Yeah,
How
yeah.
it goes together. But hopefully the DJs will kind of do their research, figure out and kind of work into each other. I know that like Prof, he's one of our DJs that's going to be DJing. He researched who's, playing before him and after him so that he can have a good start and finish to his set. So, yeah, just a piece of advice for sure.
Well, what would you do in that case if you had a DJ that played a very different genre than you before you? Like, how do you incorporate that into your beginning or end for that matter, right?
So a lot of that, like I was saying, is a lot of just communication. If say a good example is say a DJ is playing extremely heavy hard style, and you're coming in with bass house or something soft, um, you can once they're it's kind of tricky because they're playing, say they finish on a really aggressive song. First off, don't do that. Don't ever finish on something really up and heavy. You kind of want to ease into the next DJ. That's a good piece of advice. So, majority of the time, they'll have a track kind of easing into your stuff, and it's kind of a courtesy thing. Just have it so that if you're say they're playing some rhythm, okay, make sure it's a song that a lot of times they'll have a song that is melodic. It's still rhythm, it's still heavy, but it's going to be melodic so that they can kind of ease it out as the new DJ comes in. Or if the new DJ is heavy, they'll just again kind of set one of those loops on a section of the track where you can easily mix into. And a lot of that is music selection and paying attention to where you're at in the song. So say I come up to the deck, this DJ's playing something really heavy and then sets a loop in a good section of the song. Hopefully they will set a good loop, and then I'll start. And if I know it's something upbeat, I'm going to try my best to match the tempo to the current song. It might not be perfect, but you're just going to want to keep the vibe the same as the person before you. So as best you can. Sometimes you'll have to say you structure your set. You have this whole hour ready, and the person before you is playing something completely different. You can make sure you have plenty of music. That's when I first showed up to a club, I didn't have enough music for. They had me play a 4-hour show, my first show, and I didn't have enough music. So I'm like, well, the people are going to hear the same songs because I had to start the whole set list over because I ran out of music. So have plenty of music. That's a big help. Is just having a good selection of music so that if somebody's playing something different, you have something to kind of work into and start your set. Yeah.
And so that's one of those things that is actually very different. Most of the time in VR, the max you're going to get is a 2 hour set,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So that's something to keep in mind. And it also brings us full circle to the how do we start a music library, right?
Yeah,
Like
100%. Yeah, make sure you
so
got plenty of
definitely
music.
getting a lot of different genres as well.
I'll never forget. So, one of the DJs here locally, his name is Redfoot. I went to do a back to back with him, and I was so nervous because I'd never done a back to back. Now, back to backs are really cool because you I talked to him before the show, so we kind of coordinated how we were going to make it work. He said we're going to play through 3 songs each, meaning we'll play through decks 1 through 3, and then you start on 4 and bring into 1 and 2, and just we would cycle songs. But we communicated before before the fact that we started, we communicated, oh, we're going to play 3 tracks a piece, and then I'll set a loop, and then you can come in on the next track on track 4, and we'll just work that way. So coordination is really important. And a back to back is really, really cool because you get to work with another artist live in person and on stage, and it's a really fun time. And it's so different working simultaneously because sometimes you'll show up and you have the whole thing to yourself, and that's really cool, but it's a little different experience working with somebody else that's got a whole different library than you do. And I'll never forget when I seen his laptop, he had 9,200 something songs on there.
Ugh,
And I was like, are you kidding me? What? He's like, yeah,
God.
dude, I save music all the time. And it's 9,000 songs, bro. That's crazy. But taught me have plenty of music because you never know what you're gonna get into any given night. So
That's awesome.
Playing not only in VR chat and RL, um, do you ever get nervous?
100%. Yeah, and before a show. I mean, I did a show on New. I got nervous then because I hadn't done a show since like March of the year before. So it was, yeah, yeah. I still get nervous before a show because it's that kind of anticipation of can I've prepped, I've spent hours getting everything ready, and now I've got to go perform it. So there's a little, I get a little nervous just before, but once I get into it, it's pretty great.
Do you
You got to get in the ebbs and flow of it. But
do you have any advice for dealing with those pre-show jitters? For people who are just getting started, maybe they have that set, but they're kind of like, eh, you know,
yeah,
it
it's
starts
really
feeling.
tough. It's really tough because you can get the jitters, and then you can get too much in your head, and then you're thinking, oh, that transition was garbage, and then it just all kind of builds up, and then you really mess up. It just you're playing. Yeah, you can get really see. I think the best thing to do for me is just breathe, take a breath. I do breathing exercises before each show. I stretch before each show because my knees, listen, my knees have had the time of their life trying to keep up with some of the shows that I've done. Stretching is very important. It's very important because
Mm,
you're going to be
mm.
bobbing and weaving and doing your stuff. So make sure you're stretched.
And not
Make
only for
sure,
dancers,
Keep it
but also
yeah,
limber.
for
no,
DJs.
stay
Stretch.
very, very stretched. Elasticity is
Um,
important. But yeah, breathing exercises are good because, like, I still get nervous. I'm going to be nervous for GearFest because I'm opening up day 4, so it's going to be,
yeah.
it's like, oh, it's the anticipation of it, and yeah, definitely just breathe and know that you are just in your mind, kind of set that mental picture of I'm going to perform the best that I can. And at the end of the day, that's the goal, is perform the best that I can in whatever I'm doing. And if it doesn't end that way, you finish and you're upset that transitions weren't that great and you could have mixed this better, and oh, I paused that song completely for 2 seconds, and hopefully no one noticed, but I'm sure someone
Yeah.
noticed. A lot of those thoughts are going to be cycling in your head, especially if you do mess up. And you will mess up. Here's the thing, you're going to mess up. I mess up all the time. It happens, but don't let it get to you too much, because the majority of the time, people are just there to dance. They don't even notice that you messed up. They'll have no idea. You can kind of get away with a lot more in VR because say you do pause a song by accident, you hit the wrong deck and you pause the track and you immediately play it again, and you're worried about that. A lot of people aren't going to notice in VR. So yeah, don't worry about it too much. But
Oh, that lag is so
Oh,
weird, huh?
really? Most
yeah.
people are, yeah, it just it's a new kind of loop. Let's just keep going. So when you screw up, it's kind of like, okay, well, we did that thing and we're just gonna keep going
The
and
show must go on.
just
The
bring it
show
back.
must go on. You have to
Bring it
keep
back.
going. Yep.
Chimera asked in chat, how many songs would you feel comfortable with minimum per hour of a set? Also, if you want to play multiple genres, how does that affect the number of tracks you want?
So your typical hour is about 32 tracks, and well, for me, because I usually only play. Say a track is 3 minutes long. I'm probably only going to play about a minute and a half of that track. I'm not going to play the whole thing. That's not for every track, but a majority of the time, I usually only play the intro, the build, the drop, the chorus, and then as it starts to fade out, I'll bring the next track in. So it's usually about a minute and a half of each track. So I'll kind of work off of that. I usually set about 32 tracks. It's either 30 to 32. If I'm given an hour, that's the minimum that I need, is usually about 32 tracks. But that's because of the way I mix. It's going to be different for each DJ because they build their library a little differently. Some DJs will literally come in and play track from start to finish. Right at the end of the track, they'll bring their next track in, and so they'll have a full 3 minute song and then another full 3 minute song. So they'll have to structure their tracks a little differently. But usually 32 to, if you're like wanting to cut things back a little further, then I usually like 40 tracks per crate, per whatever set you're putting together for an hour. So 32 to 40 tracks per hour, and then just build off of that. You can, double, triple, however many hours you have. But as far as playing multiple genres, say you do get a 2 hour show in VR chat, you can kind of break it up into quarters. You could start with house and then work into tech house, and then from tech house kind of ease into and break it into different BPMs so that you have different sections of your set. You have a 2 hour set. I would break the first half hour into like house, bass house, tech house, rhythm. So you're finishing each different 30-minute or hour into a genre. But just transitions are your friend when it comes to working with multiple genres. And pay attention to your beats per minute, because that's a big play. You don't want to jump from 130 to 150, because people are going to notice immediately that that track jumped so fast. They're going to know that. So you can just pay attention to your beats per minute. That's huge. You can really get away with a lot with the beat sync. I have beat sync on here, and a lot of DJs are going to tell you, oh, don't use sync. Listen, beat sync is your best friend when it comes to mixing multiple genres or just mixing in general. You can, I try not to go, a good rule of thumb is not go over 5 beats per minute. If you're at, say, 130 on this track and 135 on this track, and you hit beat sync, majority of the people aren't really going to notice. And it all depends on where you do that at in the track. So a big part of a good transition is knowing the music. And a good piece of advice to anybody, this is just a base piece of advice, because I've been asked, how do I start DJing? What's a good piece of starter advice? Know your music. Know every single piece of music in your library from start to finish. Because if you can do that, you can transition to anything, because you know the song from start to finish. You know how it plays out.
Mm,
Know your music.
mm.
That's huge.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been a consistent piece of advice from everybody I've ever talked to, for good reason.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm curious about your setup.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Ah,
So,
you
um,
want the novice, yes.
yeah, we have. Let's go over this real quick. So I just got these CDJ 2000 Nexus series CDJs. These are they were used, and I just got them last week. Before that, I was using this center mixer, which is the DDJ FLX6. This mixer was like the major jump into like my whole shift of wanting to do DJing professionally was this mixer, because I had my little SB3 and it was great. It was a good teacher, and I definitely recommend starting on something small because it'll give you the ins and outs of a controller or the full units, you know. So the DDJ FLX6 was my friend at the very like start of the VR chat club scene blowing up. I got one of these and I started really learning how to mix properly and doing all kinds of stuff. It was the first 4-channel mixer that I had. Being able to mix with 4 channels was a little different because it gave me a lot more room to work with. Now, once I had added these, because I just added these CDJs last week, it opened up even more for me to work with. The problem with the Flex 6 is, yes, you do have 4 channels, but I have to hit this button to alternate between channels 2 and 4 and 1 and 3. So I can only play essentially 2 tracks at a time. That's not 100% true, but you know, it's the way I would mix was those 2 tracks at a time. Now that I have the CDJs, I've opened it up to 4-channel mixing. I can now play tracks 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can have tracks 1 playing in just a little loop. I can have track 2 playing the main song. I can have track 3 playing a vocal, and track 4 I can have ready for the next track to transition into. You can do so much more once you have like the full setup. But you can do, I mean, anything you can learn on to start with. I recommend getting a small start and then working your way up. I spent a lot of money on these.
Yeah, I bet.
I dipped into my savings to get them,
Those are
but
pricey.
they're a little pricey, but they're so fun. They're such a game changer. So yeah.
Awesome.
I would say know your hardware is secondary to knowing your music because there's so much potential, even on simple decks, right?
100%, 100%. And that goes back to what I was saying. Know your music. If you know your music, start to finish, you can you can play on a little SB3. You can play on the DDJ 400. It's not really going to matter because you know the equipment. You know where the play and pause button is. You know where your EQ is. You're able to mix essentially your music. And once you know that, you can play on any piece of equipment they give you. While it is really nice to have a setup like this and be able to work through these four different decks, I can still play on 2 channels if I want and be able to put on a great show. And that's really important. So
Awesome.
a fun fact about so someone mentioned they had a Flex 6. Who was that? Hackster. I see you.
Yeah.
The Flex 6 is such a cool, unique piece of equipment because it has a merge effect knob here on the side that allows you to merge from track to track a lot more efficiently. I try to stay away from that because when you show up to a club, you're not going to have that to help you mix songs. So good rule of thumb is learning how to mix via loops, learning how to mix what's a good example? Hot cues. Hot cues are your best friend, I've learned, when it comes to mixing. I will set So just the other day, I was working on techno. I'll go through all the tracks, every single track. I'll load it into my library. I'll look at the track from start to finish, get a good vibe of what it sounds like, and I'll set a hot cue at where I want to start the track. It doesn't matter the show. It doesn't matter where I'm at, wherever I would like to start. I have an A hot cue, a B hot cue, a C hot cue, so on and so forth. With the Flex 6, you have your pads here. You have 8 options for hot cues. But hot cues are a really, really cool option to have for starting your tracks and transitions, because if you're building your set, you can use those to start at a specific spot. And once I go through, I'm done with track 4 here. I go through and set 1, 2, and 3, and then I'll set my hot cues on all of those so they're ready to go as I transition into them. So that's why I really like the Flex 6. Another thing I like with the Flex 6 is jog cutter. Jog cutter is an option on this controller that you don't have with any other controller. I don't even know if it's on the Flex 10. I think it's only specific to this model. It allows you to scratch, and I've learned a lot about scratching via the jog cutter, but if you can, scratching is a whole nother thing. That it's kind of a niche in the DJ scene. It kind of started with hip hop and that era in the 80s. Scratching was a whole unique thing that you could do to kind of separate yourself from other DJs. And you'll see like Carl Cox is really good at it. James Hype, James is really, really great at scratching. So just it's really fun. It's a fun feature to use. Not everybody is able to use that because it's not an option on other, like the CDJs don't have that. But if you want an intro into learning how to scratch, the jog cutter on the Flex 6 is super cool piece of equipment. But
there you
again,
go, X. You can play around with that and get a little used to scratching.
100%. 100%.
See what you can come up with.
I recommend, like, if you're going to scratch, definitely have acapellas. I have a whole crate of just acapellas, just vocals. And you'll find those are really, really cool to help you transition into a song. And make sure your songs are labeled correctly, because if they're not, like, I'll label the acapellas, but I don't know what tempo they're in because there's no beat on the acapella. So when I am putting the acapella in my library, I will put what BPM it was originally at so that I know what it was at. So yeah.
Sweet.
Anyone else?
Questions. Hit me with them.
Make a comment. That was really interesting. I didn't know that you could attach other controllers onto like the Flex series, right? And use them kind of in conjunction with them.
Yeah. So that is an option in Rekordbox. You have to have the computer controller. It's just it's not like your analog audio inputs, but you'll need the your USB connections. You'll need a USB hub to actually connect them all. But once they're all in the same hub, you can connect them in the software and setups. Like when I turn these on and off, I have to select which deck they are individually. So this is deck 3, this is deck 4, and you'll have to do that manually on here, but you can do it. Now, well, the cool thing is once you've done that, you can actually, I can still play deck 4 on the Flex 6 right here on the Flex 6, but now that I have a 4th deck, I don't need to, but I can still use the CDJ here and do all the pad effects that I would on the Flex 6 with the 4th channel, because it's still an option to swap to on the controller. So kind of a fun feature, but again, that's all dependent on your equipment and what you plug into. So yeah.
So we're starting to go a little over an hour, but I asked Claw about this, and we often exchange stories with some of the OGs and stuff that we have come in for the portal posses. Big memory for you when it comes to DJing. Do you have something that you remember fondly, or is most embarrassing, or just tell us a story, Gear? Story. Once upon a time, there was a DJ.
Man, let's see. Some of my favorite memories were playing for Wobble Wednesday, for Alcoholics Unanimous, Castle in the VRU, Wobble Wednesday. My first exposure to wobble, which was kind of like rhythm, but it was as it sounds, it's a wobbly beat. It's different. Ganja White Knight's very infamous for playing a lot of wobble, and it was my first introduction into playing wobble, and kind of my first introduction into playing a different genre than what I'd kind of gotten comfortable to. But I showed up there and started playing, and I found that I hadn't put my set list together correctly, and I showed up and I'm like, well, crap, this one's at 156 and this one's at 130. I'm not sure how I'm going to transition this because I'm playing on the SB3. So and what I ended up doing was just a chop where I set the loop and then just drop the next track in instantly, and I felt like crap after I did it because I was like, "What? That was so garbage! It was so garbage." I was so mad at myself, and I just learn from then on to kind of set my BPMs and everything. A lot of people like critique things like that. I found myself critiquing other DJs that would do terrible mixing, and I a piece of advice: just enjoy the music. Just enjoy the music. Enjoy what you do 100%. And if you're really driven to want to pursue this as a career, you're gonna love it. No matter what happens, no matter what you go through, you just gotta love it. Put your whole heart into it for sure.
Here,
It's yeah, 100%.
Mm.
Yuri has a question in the chat. What's the best way to expand your library of tracks? There are so many different options, and it's kind of confusing trying to navigate them all. That goes back to what you were saying earlier. Okay.
100%. I think a good way of expanding your library is listen, go on SoundCloud and listen to tech house, bass house, rhythm. Just go through all the electronic genres and not even electronic. Go to soul music. Just listen to music. You'll find what you like, but you got to listen to a ton of music. I've spent hours. I spent hours yesterday just listening to music and figuring out what I like. That's a big part of building your library. I think separating it out. So in my library, let me go back here. I have the very top is my techno playlist because I just finished putting that together. I have soul music. I have my GearFest set that I'm putting together, acapellas, and then what I've done is separated all my individual tracks into different keys, from A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and I actually need to change that one. But I even have metal. I have screamo. I have different genres. But each different genre has its own folder, and I'll separate them into different folders, and then separate those into different keys. Some people prefer mixing by key, and that's fine. You can do it that way. You can mix by key. You can mix by tempo. I prefer a little bit of both, but make sure you're separated out into your individual, make a crate for each individual genre so that you know kind of the song and the genre all in one crate. It makes it a lot easier for putting a set together, a show together, and definitely helps build your library is having those individual playlists and crates for individual music. I have stuff for wobble. I have Celtic music, Irish music, um, just different 80s hair metal. I mean, I have all kinds of fun stuff in here.
Awesome.
But you it's really
Banjo.
definitely a learning experience where you can challenge yourself. You can some nights, for example, AU had a they had a themed night, and actually one of the clubs I DJ'd themed night. They had like a salsa Hispanic night. So I built a whole playlist of just Hispanic music for that night, and that helped me build a little more of my library. So definitely challenge yourself by things like that, where you sit down and what do I not play? What am I not really? Say I show up and they're having a heavy metal night. Let's go and find some heavy metal that I enjoy, and that's a good way to challenge yourself for sure.
A kid in the chat asks, where do you draw your line between oh, what the crowd at the venue wants to hear versus what you have and want to play? What's your gold standard for reading the crowd?
That's a great question. That is a great question. So like I said, I structure my show from start to finish, and maybe I'm halfway through my dance floor. Everyone's in the back by the bar, just kind of chilling, and what I'm playing just is not. No matter what I put out, is not fitting the vibe of the people. That's when it's like, okay, well, I've got to switch it up. And so that's where structuring your music comes in. I'll go from the playlist that I had set up for that night to soul music or some bass house. I'll switch it up so that I can just kind of experiment with the crowd. And a lot of that has to do with the venue. And we kind of talked about this earlier. When you show up to a club, know what the club is kind of infamous for, kind of know the scene. And a lot of that, answering that question specifically, is knowing what that club is infamous for. What do they like? What is the scene there like? I showed up to a club that was strictly vampire rave. Imagine like vampire rave. You show up and you've got
Amazing.
you have just a whole heavy dirty bass just club, right? And you show up and you have a house set. They're not even going to be interested in what you're playing. So make sure you have plenty of music and backups. So just as an example, I showed up to that club. It was underground. It was in the basement of the upstairs was a whole bar and cafe. And then you went downstairs and they had like wine barrels and stuff and red lights. And I was like, oh, this is a completely different vibe from what I had prepared. So I had that on backup and I ended up making it work. But you definitely, if ever you show up and what you're playing is not fitting the vibe, make sure you have backups ready. Kind of you create the vibe. You are the DJ. Your job is to make sure everyone's having a good time. So make sure you have the music to do that. To answer that question.
Awesome.
Does singling out labels or artists that produce what you like help build your library quickly? Or are there any horrible consequences issues with sound variety?
Not really. I think if you start with what you like, it'll really help build your library very quickly. What you like personally is what you'll enjoy mixing the most. I'd start there for sure. If you like, I really like James Hype, and so I'll build I'll have a whole bunch of house and tech house and bass house and have James Hype in there. And so listening to that artist, a lot of times if on YouTube, it'll recommend you other stuff. Spotify has a really cool feature. Where's my other phone? I'll get to it in a minute. They have a really cool feature that once you start listening to radios and stuff, you'll hear a song that you enjoy, you can like it and save it. They'll start curating a playlist for you, and you can use that to really help build your set. So definitely
Discover Weekly as
yeah, that's what it's called. That's what it's called. Yep.
Okay, that's the one you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about. Yep.
On Spotify.
That'll really help build your library very quickly, for sure.
That's a joy of my Monday every Monday as I go in and listen to all 30 of those songs.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Good stuff.
Anybody want to do any closeouts? We've been kind of like lightning rounding you. It was different.
Oh, this is great.
This
is great.
Claude was like a nice
Claude told me they like to talk.
Tell us your things.
Yeah, Claude likes to talk. Claude will just ramble on and on. And I'm the type that's like, I'll take questions and answer as they come, So, yeah,
that's awesome.
100%.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this and hearing your experiences and your advice.
Not a problem. Yeah, not a problem. This is cool. I'm glad you asked, Foxy. I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, I'm glad too. You want to come in for another one, maybe closer to GearFest?
Sure, 100%. Yeah.
Let's go.
Speaking of, do you want to plug GearFest or anything else you got going on?
Yeah,
for sure. We have GearFest coming up at the very end of the month. It's the last weekend of the month. It starts on Wednesday, the 29th, and goes through to Saturday, the February 1st. We're going to start, trying to remember, I think it's 7 p.m. Eastern, and then it runs through to 3 a.m. Eastern. So 8 hours of music, 8 DJs a night. And we are raising money for the American Red Cross. We would love to see all of you out there. We're trying to get as much, attention on the festival and the charity specifically as possible, because we want to give back to the community that has really given to us. And I would not be where I am today without this festival and without the people putting this festival together. And so if you'll come out and hang out, we can't wait to see you. Cannot wait to have you there. So looking forward to it.
Samarosa says, thank you for sharing your experience and solid advice.
Not a problem. Thanks for your interest in DJing. It's I recommend everybody at least tries some form of music in whether that's DJing or even playing a piano. Definitely music is somebody really gave me a good profound sentence. It was if paint is how we color light, music is how we color sound. So it's really honorable for me to be able to be in the position to give that to other people. So yep.
It's a beautiful quote.
All right. I think it has been completed.
Yes.
Thank you, Gear.
Not a
That's
problem.
solid. Appreciate you.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'll be there.
Have a fantastic night.
Yep. You too. Take
You
care.
too. You too.
Bye bye.
See you later, Gear.